The question was asked by Councillor Dreskar of the Velthari Dominion in the third session of the Compact Integration Summit in front of representatives from 41 species, with the full proceedings on record. He had meant it as a rhetorical point. The Velthari had not lost a military engagement in 3 centuries. The question was designed to establish a number, a small, dismissive number, that would anchor the subsequent discussion about humanity's proposed seat on the Compact Security Council. Admiral Owen Mercer was sitting in the human delegation box when Dreskar asked it. He watched the Velthari commander, a being named Catan, 7 feet of silver-gray plating and 4 arms and 300 years of undefeated military service, receive the question and go completely still. Catan did not answer. The silence stretched for 11 seconds, which in diplomatic proceedings was long enough to constitute an event. Councillor Dreskar, who had expected a number, something between 50 and 500, some figure that would land in the room like a fact and stay there, looked at Catan with an expression that Mercer had learned to read on Velthari faces as the equivalent of mild confusion. "Commander Catan," Dreskar said. The question was direct. How many soldiers would the Velthari require to subdue humanity's current military capacity? Catan looked at Dreskar. Then he looked at the human delegation box. His 3 eyes settled on Mercer for a moment. Not with hostility, not with the particular contempt that Velthari commanders reserved for species they had already assessed, but with something that Mercer, in 11 years of diplomatic postings, had never seen in a Velthari face before. Something that looked, very briefly, like respect. "I will require additional time to formulate an accurate response," Catan said. "I ask the Council's patience." The session was recessed for 40 minutes. In those 40 minutes, Mercer sat in the corridor outside the chamber and thought about what it meant for a Velthari commander with 300 years of undefeated service to not have an answer ready. His aide, Lieutenant Sloan, sat beside him. "He's stalling," she said. "They don't have the data. They haven't run the assessment." "They've run the assessment," Mercer said. "They ran it before the summit. The Velthari always run the assessment before the summit." He looked at the closed chamber doors. "He's not stalling because he doesn't have a number. He's stalling because he has one and doesn't want to say it out loud." "Why not?" Mercer was quiet for a moment. "Because whatever the number is, it changes things." The session resumed. Catan stood at the presentation platform and delivered what the official record would later describe as the most unusual military briefing in the Compact's 400-year history. "The Velthari Dominion has conducted 43 military integrations," Catan began. His voice was flat and precise, the voice of a commander accustomed to delivering assessments that other people acted on. "In each case, we assessed the target civilization's military capacity and determined an appropriate force allocation. The largest force we deployed was against the Thraxian Confederacy. 17 warships, 4,000 personnel, engagement duration of 11 days. He paused. "We have never required a second assessment. Our initial calculation has been accurate in every instance." Another pause, longer this time. "Our initial assessment of humanity required 7 revisions." The chamber was quiet. "The first assessment was conducted 14 months ago, based on public military data and observed capability. The number was 400 personnel, 6 warships, estimated engagement duration of 3 weeks. He looked at the human delegation. "The second assessment was conducted after we reviewed the historical record of human internal conflicts. The number increased. The third assessment incorporated analysis of human tactical doctrine across 19 documented conflicts. The number increased again." A pause. "By the 7th revision, we had stopped calling them assessments and started calling them projections, because assessments imply a stable target, and humanity does not present a stable target." Councillor Dreskar said, "Commander, the Council requires a number." Catan looked at him. "The Council requires an honest answer. Those are different things." He turned back to the full chamber. "The Velthari calculate military engagements through a model that has worked reliably for 3 centuries. The model assumes that a civilization's military capacity can be accurately measured at a given moment, that this measurement is stable, and that force allocation can be determined accordingly." He paused. "Every civilization we have encountered has fit this model. You measure them. The measurement holds. You allocate force. The engagement concludes." He stopped. The silence was the kind that happens when a room is waiting for the sentence that changes something. "Humanity does not fit the model," Catan said. "In 14 months of assessment, every measurement we have taken has been superseded by the next measurement. Not because humanity has been building new weapons or expanding its fleet. The hardware changes have been within expected parameters. The measurements change because humanity changes how it fights faster than we can measure how it fights. He looked at the human delegation again, and Mercer felt the weight of 300 years of military experience examining him with something that was not contempt. We have a word in Velthari for civilizations that learn from conflict. The word implies a quality that compounds. Each engagement teaches something that makes the next engagement more costly for the opponent. In 3 centuries, we have encountered 2 civilizations with this quality. One of them no longer exists. The other is humanity. Dreskar said, "Then give us the current number." "The current number," Catan said, "is classified at the highest level of Velthari military intelligence. I am not authorized to disclose it in an open session." A pause. "What I am authorized to tell you is that it is the largest number our command has ever calculated for a non-peer civilization, and that it has increased 3 times since this summit began 4 days ago, because in 4 days of observation, our assessment team has identified 17 tactical adaptations in human diplomatic security protocols that were not present when the summit opened." He looked at the room. "Humanity has been improving its security posture in real time, in response to our presence, without, as far as we can determine, any central directive to do so. Individual humans observed a situation, assessed a risk, and adapted. 17 of them, in 4 days, without being asked." The chamber was completely silent. "Commander Catan," said Elder Varath of the Aetheri, the oldest member of the council and the one most difficult to surprise, "are you telling this council that the Velthari Dominion cannot provide a reliable assessment of the force required to subdue humanity?" Catan stood very still. In the human delegation box, Mercer was very still too. "I am telling this council," Catan said, "that any number I provide will be inaccurate by the time the council acts on it, and that the direction of the inaccuracy is consistent. The number always goes up." He paused one final time. "I am also telling this council that in 300 years of military service, I have never stood in this chamber and said what I am about to say." The chamber held its breath. "The Velthari Dominion recommends against military engagement with humanity, not because the cost would be prohibitive, though it would, but because we do not believe the engagement would produce a stable outcome. You cannot end a conflict with a civilization that treats every conflict as information." The recess that followed lasted 3 hours. Mercer spent most of it in a small room off the main corridor with Admiral Elena Ashford, the mission's senior military advisor, and a pot of coffee that neither of them touched. Ashford had her tablet open to the session transcript and had read Catan's statement 4 times by the time Mercer stopped pacing. "He just told 41 civilizations that were too complicated to fight," Ashford said. "He told 41 civilizations that fighting us gets more expensive the longer it goes on," Mercer said. "That's different. Is it better?" Mercer thought about the 7 assessments, the 17 adaptations in 4 days, the number that kept going up. "I don't know yet," he said. "It depends on what they do with it." What the compact did with it, in the 3 hours of closed session that followed, was argue. Mercer knew this because Lieutenant Sloan had been doing the thing she was exceptionally good at, which was being physically present in corridors near closed doors and paying attention to what came through them. She reported back at the 2-hour mark with a summary that was incomplete and useful. The Velthari bloc was divided. Dreskar's faction wanted the military assessment buried, not because they disputed it, but because a public acknowledgement that humanity was difficult to subdue gave humanity leverage they hadn't earned through the normal mechanisms. Another faction, smaller but vocal, was arguing that the assessment should be formally entered into the compact record because the alternative, pretending the assessment didn't exist, was a form of institutional dishonesty that had historically preceded bad decisions. The Aetheri were quiet, which Elder Varath's staff indicated meant they were thinking carefully rather than not thinking at all. The 3 human-adjacent species, civilizations that had been integrated into the compact within the last century and still remembered what it felt like to be on the outside of it, were, according to Sloane's corridor intelligence, doing something unexpected. They were talking to each other. "About what?" Mercer asked. "About whether what Catan said applies to them too," Sloane said. "Whether the quality he described, the compounding learning thing, whether that's specific to humanity or whether it's something that happens to any species that's been through enough conflict." Mercer looked at her. "That's a more interesting question than the one Dreskar asked." "Yes, sir," Sloane said. "It is." If this story has you hooked, subscribe now and hit the bell. Now, back to it. The closed session ended without a formal resolution, which in compact politics meant that the question had been deemed too significant to decide quickly. The summit would extend by 2 days. The Human Delegation's Security Council application would remain in consideration. No vote would be taken until the extended session concluded. Mercer considered this a partial victory and a complete complication. That evening, he received a request for a private meeting. The request came through official channels, formatted correctly, with the appropriate diplomatic courtesies. The sender was Commander Catan. They met in one of the summit's neutral conference rooms, a space designed to belong to no one, with furniture that no species found either comfortable or uncomfortable, and lighting calibrated to be adequate for all known visual systems. Mercer arrived first. Catan arrived exactly on time, which Mercer had learned was a Velthari signal of respect. Arriving early indicated eagerness. Arriving late indicated contempt. Arriving precisely indicated that you considered the meeting worth your full attention. They sat across from each other. No aides, no translators. Catan's standard was excellent, and Mercer had spent 3 years learning enough Velthari to follow a conversation, which he had done without announcing it, which Catan now indicated he was aware of with a slight adjustment of his secondary arms that meant something Mercer didn't quite have the vocabulary for. You understood more of the session than your expression indicated, Catan said. I understood all of it, Mercer said. I was monitoring my expression deliberately. Why? Because a human who visibly understands a military assessment being delivered about humans in a room full of other species is a human who is performing confidence. I wasn't sure confidence was the right performance. Catan was quiet for a moment. What was the right performance? Listening, Mercer said. Just listening. Let you say what you were going to say without making it about how we received it. Another pause. Longer. The 17 adaptations, Catan said. You were aware of them. Not specifically. I knew my security team was doing their job. I didn't know your assessment team was watching them do it. They weren't aware they were being observed? Probably not, Mercer said. But it wouldn't have changed what they did. If there's a risk, you address the risk. Whether someone is watching you address it is a secondary consideration. Catan looked at him with the three-eyed attention that Mercer had felt in the chamber, the quality of observation that came from 3 centuries of studying opponents. The question Drescar asked, Catan said. He expected a small number, something that would diminish your standing. I know. The number I have is not small. I know that too, Mercer said, or I suspected it from the silence. The silence was not strategic, Catan said. I was recalibrating. It is unusual for me to encounter a question I cannot answer accurately. He paused. In 300 years, I have assessed every civilization the Dominion has encountered. The assessment is not complicated. You observe capability, you model doctrine, you calculate force. The model is reliable. He looked at Mercer. Your civilization broke the model, not through superior technology or unexpected weaponry, through the speed at which you incorporate new information and change what you do with it. A pause. I have been trying to determine whether this is a human trait or a trait of your current moment, whether you are always this way or whether something in your recent history has produced it. What did you conclude? Mercer asked. That it doesn't matter, Catan said. Whether it's trait or circumstance, the result is the same. By the time an assessment is complete, the target has changed. He was quiet. I have recommended against engagement. That recommendation is genuine. It is not a diplomatic gesture or a negotiating position. The Velthari do not recommend against engagements we believe we can win cleanly. We have never made this recommendation before. Mercer sat with this. What do you want from this meeting? Catan's secondary arms adjusted again. The gesture Mercer didn't have the vocabulary for, except that it kept appearing at moments of something genuine. I want to understand something, he said. The 17 adaptations, the 7 assessments, the compounding pattern. He paused. Is it conscious? Does humanity deliberately cultivate this quality, or does it emerge without intention? Mercer thought about it honestly, because the question deserved honesty. Both, he said. We train for adaptability deliberately. We build institutions that reward it. But the speed of it, the 17 people in 4 days without a directive, that's not trained. That's something else. What is it? Discomfort, Mercer said. Humans are uncomfortable with unaddressed risk. Not all of us, but enough of us that in any given situation, someone will do something about it without being asked. The training makes that something useful, but the impulse, he paused. The impulse is just who we are. We don't like leaving problems alone. Catan was quiet for a long moment. That is the most honest military intelligence briefing I have received in 300 years, he said, and you gave it freely. Because you asked honestly, Mercer said, and because you said something in that chamber that I think cost you something to say. It did, Catan said simply. The second day of the extended summit produced the thing Mercer had been watching for since Catan's silence in the chamber, the moment when the assessment stopped being a military question and became a political one. It came from an unexpected direction. The Volmari delegation, six-limbed, honor culture, one of the three human-adjacent species Sloane had reported talking to each other, requested time on the floor. Their representative, a commander named Velsath, who had been quiet through the first 3 days of the summit, stood at the presentation platform and did something that had not happened in the Compact's recorded history. He cited Catan's assessment as precedent for a motion. The Compact's integration protocols, Velsath said, require that a civilization demonstrate stable military capacity before being considered for Security Council membership. The logic of this requirement is that unstable capacity creates unpredictable obligations for Council members. He paused. Commander Catan's assessment establishes that humanity's military capacity is not stable in the conventional sense. It is directionally stable. It consistently increases, but it does not hold still long enough to be measured with the precision the protocols require. Another pause. We move that the integration protocols be amended to include a category for civilizations whose capacity is directionally stable rather than statically stable, and we move that humanity be considered under this amended category. The chamber took 4 seconds to process this. Then it erupted. Mercer sat in the human delegation box and did not let his face communicate anything. Beside him, Sloane was doing the same thing, which was why he valued her. What Velsath had done was elegant and unexpected. He had taken the argument that was meant to exclude humanity, the instability argument, the you can't be measured argument, and reframed it as a qualification rather than a disqualification. Humanity wasn't too unstable for the Security Council. Humanity was a new category that the Security Council hadn't previously needed to account for. Dreskar's faction opposed it immediately, loudly, and with arguments that were legally sound and politically transparent. The instability argument had been their leverage. Velsath had just handed it to the other side. Elder Varath of the Aetherai called for order. She got it, eventually, because when something that had been alive for 1,200 years asked for quiet, quiet tended to follow. The motion is procedurally valid, Varath said. The Council will deliberate. She looked at the human delegation. Admiral Mercer, the Council would benefit from a human perspective on the proposed amendment. Mercer stood. He had not prepared remarks for this moment because this moment had not existed until 4 minutes ago. He walked to the presentation platform and stood where Catan had stood the day before and looked at 41 species and thought about what was true. The Volmari motion is generous, he said, more generous than we expected and more accurate than we deserve credit for. We didn't set out to be unmeasurable. We set out to survive. And survival, for us, has always meant changing faster than what was trying to kill us. He paused. Commander Catan said something yesterday that I've been thinking about since. He said you cannot end a conflict with a civilization that treats every conflict as information. He looked at Catan, who was sitting in the Velthari delegation section, with the particular stillness of someone paying complete attention. He's right. We do treat conflict as information. We treat everything as information. It's not a strategy, it's a reflex. Something went wrong, figure out why, do it differently next time. A pause. The Security Council exists to prevent conflicts from becoming catastrophic, to create frameworks where disputes are resolved before they become wars. Humanity is not on this council yet, but humanity has been doing, informally and imperfectly, and at significant cost, the thing the council exists to do, treating conflict as a problem to be solved rather than a condition to be endured. He stopped. We're not asking for a seat because we're powerful. We're asking for a seat because we think we have something useful to contribute to the question of how conflicts end. And we're aware that this claim would be easier to make if we had a better record of ending our own. He sat down. The deliberation lasted 6 hours. Mercer spent most of it in the corridor, which was where he did his best thinking. Sloane brought him food at the 3-hour mark and sat beside him without speaking, which was the correct instinct. At the 5-hour mark, Catan appeared in the corridor. He sat across from Mercer, which required him to fold his forearms in a configuration that looked uncomfortable, but apparently wasn't. They did not speak immediately. The corridor had the quality of a space between things, between the session and its outcome, between what had been and what would be decided. The motion will pass, Catan said. Not unanimously. Dreskar's faction will record opposition, but it will pass. How do you know? Because Varath voted in the closed deliberation, Catan said. She has not voted in a closed deliberation in 40 years. When she votes, the direction is known. He paused. She voted for the amendment. Mercer absorbed this. Why are you telling me? Because you told me something honestly yesterday, Catan said, and because I have been thinking about what you said, about discomfort with unaddressed risk. He was quiet for a moment. The Velthari are comfortable with risk. We have been comfortable with it for 3 centuries because our assessments have been accurate and our force has been sufficient. Comfort with risk, I am beginning to understand, may be a liability when the risk in question is a civilization that becomes more capable faster than you can assess it. He looked at Mercer. We recommended against engagement. We did not recommend for integration. Those are different positions. I know, Mercer said. I am telling you that the second position is under discussion within the Dominion, separately from this council, at a level above my authorization to disclose. He paused. I am telling you this because the discussion will proceed better if the human side understands that the silence in the chamber was not strategic. It was genuine. And genuine things, in my experience, tend to produce more durable outcomes than strategic ones. Mercer looked at him. 300 years of undefeated service and a silence that had changed a summit. Thank you, he said. Don't thank me, Catan said. Give me an accurate assessment next time instead. A pause that contained something that was not quite humor but was adjacent to it. If such a thing is possible with your civilization. Probably not, Mercer said. We'll keep changing. Yes, Catan said, I know. He stood. That is, I have concluded, not entirely a problem. He walked back toward the chamber. Mercer stayed in the corridor for a while longer, thinking about 7 assessments and 17 adaptations, and a silence that had lasted 11 seconds and changed what came after. The motion passed with 31 votes in favor, 8 opposed, and 2 abstentions. Humanity's seat on the Security Council was confirmed under the amended protocols, effective the following session. The number Catan had calculated, the one classified at the highest level of Velthari military intelligence, was never officially disclosed. It remained in a file that was reviewed, according to Velthari records, every 6 months. Each review updated the number upward. The reviews became, eventually, a formality. Not because the number stopped growing, but because the Velthari assessment team had concluded what Catan had concluded in the chamber, that a number which always went up was not really a number. It was a direction. And directions, unlike numbers, did not require updating. They just required watching.